So we saw, and you saw, and we've been working since 1984 with some of the cases of malformations, which they believe sometimes are related to Agent Orange. Some of the cancers, which may or may not be related to Agent Orange, some of the mental retardation and the inability to fight infections. That's the largest obstetrical hospital in the south of Vietnam.
Okay, we're going to show the audience a long 45-minute sequence in just a moment. Also, our guest in this segment is Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, retired. Agent Orange, big impact on your life. Tell us just a little bit about that, and also whether or not you think it's still an important question to be dealt with.
Well, briefly, when I took command of the Naval Forces Vietnam and had to move our small craft into the narrow rivers and canals along the Cambodian border, in the dense foliage we began to take casualties at the rate of 6% a month, which meant the average young man had about a 70% probability of being killed or wounded during his year of service. I then used Agent Orange, as the Army had been for 3 years, to defoliate the banks 1,000 yards on each side and reduce the casualties to less than 1% a month. So we saved thousands of lives, but we now know that the cost of that has been hundreds of lives lost due to cancer and many other lives affected by birth defects of the progeny of some of those veterans.
You lost a son.
I had a son who was in command of one of those small craft who 15 years later came down with 2 different forms of cancer, both non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Hodgkin's. And after a 5-year battle and a transplant, we lost him.
What year?
In 1988.
And do you attribute that to Agent Orange?
Yes, I think in my son's case, the fact that he had 2 different forms of cancer makes it very probable. Obviously, people are going to die of cancer whether or not they went to Vietnam. And so what one always is talking about is the effect at the margin. I don't think there is any doubt but there are greater numbers of cancers among Vietnam veterans and other effects than among control groups.
Should tell our audience also that, and we've mentioned this throughout this series, that a lot of what we were able to do was on the run. I mean, we only had a short time, and people would say, all right, the hospital is ready to see you, and we'd take off there, cameras rolling. Very spontaneous, and we felt, frankly, inadequate as we were going through the process, not being sure of getting the right answers. And that's, you and I met in Vietnam, and you were gracious enough to come down here and talk about this. Dr. Schechter, how did you get into the Agent Orange issue in the first place, and where are you doing your work now?
Well, I am a veteran of the Vietnam War. I served in the Army Medical Corps, but ironically, during that time, we did not know about Agent Orange or dioxin, and we were never told. I became involved in the dioxin question when we had a PCB transformer fire in Binghamton, New York, where I'm on the faculty of the medical school there. And the question came up, did the dioxins get into any of the workers, the firefighters or others, the cleanup workers, or not? We realized that dioxins were being measured in other countries, but not yet in Americans. So we did, in fact, measure the dioxins and the related chemicals in Americans, and it was suggested, if you're interested in dioxins as a health issue, why don't you go to Vietnam, where the largest dioxin contamination in the world occurred with Agent Orange. So I started visiting the Ministry of Health and the various hospitals in 1984. What we wanted to know was, is there any intake of dioxin into the Vietnamese? And also, of course, we were concerned about American veterans. So we've now been doing studies in Vietnamese to see if the dioxin characteristic of Agent Orange is elevated in some of the Vietnamese exposed to Agent Orange. The answer is yes. In some cases, there is an elevation, there is an intake. And in American Vietnam veterans in Massachusetts and Michigan, where we did studies, we found a smaller number still have elevation of the dioxin of Agent Orange. So the question is, where do the dioxins move in the environment after the herbicide spraying or other exposures, and how much does it take to cause the health effects? The latter is the question we're about ready to start looking at in Vietnam.
I'm going to come back and ask you to introduce this tape, which, by the way, both of our guests have already seen once, and they will watch it with you for the second time, then we'll come back and talk about it some more. You were Chief of Naval Operations what year?
From 1970 to 1974.
And you were in Vietnam what years?
From 1968 to 1970.
Have you spent much time in the last 10, 15 years on the Agent Orange question, and if so, what?
Yes, we began to study it, my son and I, when we began to suspect that his cancers were the result of exposure. And then when Secretary Edward Derwinski took office as Secretary of Veterans Affairs, he asked me to take on a special assignment at no compensation to do a study of the Agent Orange issue, and I spent 7 months analyzing all of the studies and talking to a great number of medical experts, including Dr. Schechter, and I came up with a study which concluded that it was at least as likely as not, which is what the law requires, that there are about 28 different health effects that are related to exposure to Agent Orange.
As a way of introduction to this tape, you see this stuff all the time. We have not, and we should tell the viewers that some of it might be quite disturbing. Is that the way to, how would you lead into this videotape and tell the viewers how to watch it? What questions should they ask, and what should they be aware of as we watch this 45-minute tape?
This tape will give the viewers the opportunity to see a large obstetrical hospital in Saigon City, now known as Ho Chi Minh City. The most shocking, the most disturbing part for most viewers is the room with bottles of malformed fetuses or newborns. Those are stored in the Anatomical Museum of the Obstetrics Hospital to illustrate malformations which are occurring in the south of Vietnam. Some Vietnamese physicians believe that a certain percent of the malformations are caused by the dioxin in Agent Orange. That could be a biologically plausible thing to believe. We've seen that in animals, we've seen this in humans in other episodes around the world. In addition, they talk about choriocarcinoma and hydatidiform mole. Those are growths that are seen in pregnant women and following pregnancy, including a type of cancer, which may or may not be related to dioxin, but that there may be an excess of cancers of certain types from dioxins now is on fairly strong scientific ground. My scientific guess would be that those particular cancers are not going to be found related to dioxin based on the measurements we've done in some of the women in that very hospital. We did not find elevated levels of dioxins from that type of cancer. We did from other cancers, but not that type. And that type of cancer is common in Southeast Asia. So your viewers are seeing the largest obstetrics hospital in the south of Vietnam. They're seeing certain types of cancers or growths in the women who were pregnant. They're seeing malformations. They're seeing Siamese twins. And they're seeing children who are born with malformations as well as children who died from the malformations and who are preserved in an anatomical museum.
Again, before this is over, you'll see addresses for both of our guests on the screen where you can contact them. And the other thing is, as you watch this, remember that this was not heavily produced on our part. You will see it moving very fast. You're going to have to listen closely because the Vietnamese tried very hard to speak English, but sometimes it's a bit broken, and we can't fault them for that. Our Vietnamese is not non-existent. So let's roll the tape, and we'll come back and get our guests to comment on what you're about to see.
Please sit down, please.
Thank you.
Sit down, please.
Brian Lamb is my name.
Hello, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Yes. This is Dr. Chung, the Vice Director.
Dr. Chung, nice to meet you. Dr. Nguyen? Dr. Nguyen?
Please sit down.
These folks aren't going to be able to sit down because they have to run those cameras.
Yes.
Yeah.
I speak French fluently. I speak a little English only. Please sit down, please.
Can you tell us? Can you tell us what this hospital is all about? What is done here?
Thì anh chờ một chút xíu, tôi sẽ lấy tất cả các tư liệu, tài liệu về viện thì anh sẽ nắm này. Please wait a moment. I can you take the history and the statistics of the hospital. Okay?
Fine.
Some document about the
Tôi sẽ lên tôi lấy ngay tất cả các em. Please sit down.
just see now that the Dr. Phượng, she's busy to attend a meeting for the National Assembly. So that's why she cannot receive you here today. But the other doctors will receive you. The vice directors and other doctors will receive you and take you around the hospital.
Great. And this is Dr. Chung?
Dr. Chung.
Spell that.
Dr. Chung, C-H-U-N-G.
Chung.
Chung. Yes.
Thank you.
Please, this is the statistics of our hospital.
Có giới thiệu chúng ta về cuốn sách về giới thiệu bệnh viện phụ sản, cuốn sách về nơi cuộc sống bắt đầu.
Khởi đầu cuộc sống đó hả?
Dạ, khởi đầu cuộc sống.
Để nói với chị Lan.
Dạ, hôm nay chị Lan xuống.
It says here you delivered 21,756 babies during
Yes, yes.
Is that the...
It's very much.
It is. Is that your number one reason for being here? Is a...
Em muốn nói cái vùng này.
Đó là vấn đề đó, cũng lớn nhất ở
Yes.
cái này.
Yes. Just.
And
Vô đây.
is 21,000, is that figure up or below what it has been in
Cái
recent
con
years?
số sinh đẻ 21.000 đó là con số đó đi tăng lên hay là giảm hay là...
Anh đã giúp là con số đó ngày càng tăng lên vì dân số is go up.
The figure
dân số tăng.
is ever increasing because the population of Vietnam is ever increasing.
What's the survival rate these days? Are you... And what's the life expectancy of people in Vietnam? Do you know that?
Cái con số những người sống, tỷ lệ sống như thế nào, cũng như là cái tuổi thọ của người Việt Nam là bao nhiêu?
Về phần này thì chúng tôi là một bệnh viện chuyên về sản phụ khoa đã giúp, do đó chúng ông hỏi về số sanh, số trẻ con sống thì chúng tôi nắm được. Về con số kia thì như vậy là nó thuộc về Ủy ban dân số chung.
Nhưng mà ước khoảng ông biết là bao nhiêu? Khoảng 60 hay là
cái này khó anh ạ, chúng tôi nhà khoa học mà. Thành số liệu sao thì chúng tôi biết vậy nhưng chúng tôi không dám nói những số liệu đó.
Có gì không?
con số như thế nào? Về tỷ lệ xanh và tỷ lệ sống như thế nào?
Dạ, tỷ lệ xanh, tỷ lệ sống chúng tôi có số liệu trong này hết rồi.
We have the statistics about the birth deliveries and the rates of the survivals. But regarding the life expectancy, I don't know, because it's belong to another office.
We were told that this is the hospital that dealt with Agent Orange and Blue and White.
Yes.
How much of this do you deal with? How much effects from 20 years ago do you have on people today?
We have all the chief in this statistic. You can see statistic. Chúng tôi có số liệu hết đấy, trong cái.
And which one of these would be the agents?